Welcome, welcome. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much to everyone who's joining us live for today's Lunch and Learn. From policy to projects, accelerating clean energy deployment. And thank you so much for everyone who's joining us on YouTube. I am so excited to be able to welcome Kathleen Meal, the local Clean Energy Deployment Director at League of Conservation Voters. I am sure many of you remember Kathleen was Senior Policy Director here at MCV and longtime host of this program before moving on to the National LCV, where we still get to work with her, which is so amazing. Yeah, thank you so much, Kathleen. I'm so excited to hear about the work that you're doing. My name is Maggie Summers. I'm the Outreach Director at Maine Conservation Voters and Maine Conservation Alliance. Our organizations represent more than 13,000 members and supporters dedicated to building a just, thriving future for all by acting on the climate crisis, protecting the environment, and safeguarding our democracy. MCA does that by bringing people and organizations together to educate, inspire, and advocate. And MCV does that by advocating for equitable policies, holding elected officials accountable, and winning elections. And since 2020, this weekly online Lunch and Learn series has helped us advance all of those goals, creating a shared space to explore our environmental and social history, policy priorities, climate action movement, and more. And just a few notes before we dive in. We will hear from Kathleen first, and then tackle your questions in the Q&A at the end. You don't have to wait though. Please send your questions to me or Gabe Cole through the chat, and we'll group them by category and ask as many as we can. And we ask that you please not message Kathleen because she's going to be focusing on her presentation. If you have any technical difficulties, please message Gabe and he can help you out. And as a reminder, this event is being recorded and the video will be posted on our YouTube channel later this afternoon. And you can also find a bunch of recordings of all of our programs there on YouTube, many of which feature Kathleen if anybody wants to go do a deep dive, which I highly encourage. And yeah, thank you all so much. And Kathleen, I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Maggie. And thank you all for being here. I am so excited to be back in my very favorite place of all, the Lunch and Learn community. It just made my day when Maggie reached out to ask me to present today. And I'm so excited to share the only thing that could possibly take me away from Maine conservation voters, which is the opportunity to work on getting these policies turned into actual projects. So I am going to do the thing where I share my screen and ask Maggie and Gabe to confirm that it looks all right. So far, so
Looks
good?
great. Yes.
All right. So let me do this. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work that I do now. So I am, as Maggie said, the local clean energy deployment director at the League of Conservation Voters. LCV builds power for people and the planet, and we do that by influencing policy, holding politicians accountable, and winning elections in order to create a safe and healthy communities protected by a just and equitable democracy. A lot of that sounds very familiar to what Maggie just reminded us the work of Maine conservation voters is, and that's no accident, right? LCV is a national organization that partners very, very deeply with state affiliates in 30 states, including Maine. And we work collectively, both at the federal level and at the state level in all of those 30 states to do this important work. The biggest program at LCV that we all collaborate through is the Clean Energy for All program. Clean Energy for All is a grassroots campaign to get rid of fossil fuels and embrace an equitable clean energy transition nationwide. Uh, it's really exciting to look at the progress that we have made. So This map here shows some of the clean energy for all achievements last year. Little bit of orientation here. Any state that is shaded in any color is part of the LCV ecosystem, which we call the Conservation Voters Movement. Any state that is this lovely turquoise color, like Maine is, has 100% clean energy targets set. Impressive. I think it's 19 states. This that are made in percent commitments made of active order. And the ones that are the three states that are that sort of light, four states, light green, are have net zero or carbon neutrality goals.
And Kathleen, I don't want to interrupt. I'm so sorry.
Yeah,
You broke up
go for it.
for maybe like a minute. If you just want to
Oh,
repeat what you said. So sorry
okay.
about that.
So what we're looking at here?
Yeah, perfect.
Okay. So any state that is shaded at all is part of the conservation voters movement and has an active clean energy for all program in the state. The turquoise states like Maine have those 100% clean energy commitments set in state statute. The states in red have them through executive action, those same kinds of commitments. Are you hearing me better, Maggie? Okay, awesome. Um, and the states in that light green have a net zero or carbon neutrality commitment. It's really important to know that these are not the only states that where people live have are living in a place that is committed to 100% clean energy. Utah, for example, you'll see is just gray, right? No statewide commitment, but they have a really incredible first of its kind program where communities at the municipal level have committed to 100% clean energy and are actually working with the state's largest electric utility to meet those commitments. So what that all ends up meaning is that more than 40% of people in the US live in a place committed to 100% clean energy. It's a big deal, especially when you consider that before we launched the CEFA program, that Clean Energy for All program, that number was 1%. So we're doing really, really good work together. And there's a lot more work to do. Because, of course, those 100% clean energy commitments are just the first step. This can be really frustrating because you all know it's not always an easy step, right? We work really hard to get those clean energy commitments, and we have to really mobilize and organize and convince our elected leaders that that's the right thing to do. I remember sitting in one of those debrief meetings after we got that absolutely incredible, bold, ambitious offshore wind procurement bill over the finish line together and realizing that the hard work was just beginning. Getting steel in the ground, or in our case, in the offshore wind case, steel in the water, um, it's it's a big deal. We have to, it's never been easy, right? We have to figure out where to build these projects, both from an infrastructure perspective, right? Where is the energy needed? Where can it connect to the grid? And from a community perspective, how is that potential clean energy site being used now? And how do folks on the ground feel about a shift? Once you get that figured out, the siting taken care of, there are so many permits to secure. Usually, almost always, permits at the local and the state level. But in the case of offshore wind or in the case of transmission projects, there are also federal permits to secure. The order of operations is not at all clear. So it's difficult and confusing. Then you've got to figure out the costs and benefits, right? From the developer perspective, how do you make sure that you secure the funding for that project? but also from the community perspective. What does it mean on the ground? What kind of jobs are we talking about? What kind of economic development? How are we making sure that that clean energy will also be affordable energy? Those are challenges we have always faced when it came to moving from policy to projects. But I don't have to tell this group that it's getting harder every day, right? We live in an information environment so full of mis and disinformation that all of the conversations we have are much more convoluted than they've ever been. And Maggie mentioned that Lunch and Learn archives. There are a ton of programs that dig into that information environment. So I know you are all up to speed on that. We've also faced unprecedented supply chain disruption over the last few years, right? Beginning with the pandemic and continuing with trade policies. It's not always possible for project developers to get the materials that they need to build. And of course, the one that's probably top of mind for this group is that since day one, the Trump administration has been on a regulatory and legislative blitz to undermine clean energy, right? We've seen the repeal of the clean energy tax credits that we all worked so hard to get over the finish line in the Inflation Reduction Act. We saw pauses on permitting for new wind and solar projects on public land. We saw a series of stop work orders and lease revocations for nearly complete offshore wind projects. And while it's really important for us to note and celebrate the ways that our legal system has held the line on many of those attacks, we also have to acknowledge the complete lack of guardrails for the administration's attacks, right? Just this week, we saw this $1 billion bribe to have offshore wind leaseholders relinquish those leases and invest instead in oil and gas. So this work, this policy to projects, it's getting harder all the time. And that filters down from the federal level to the community level. It leads many communities to say, we've had enough. We just can't deal with this right now. And the result of that is that nearly 1 in 4 counties in the country have effectively banned clean energy development. Some of them have actual bans, project moratoriums. Don't bring us a project at all. In other cases, there are a series of local ordinances about setbacks or view sheds or decibel levels that all add up to making it impossible to build projects, even though it's technically, legally still possible. For now, the important thing to know is that this landscape varies dramatically across the country, right? These bans are not equally distributed. But it's also important to know that Maine is not immune. So you see a couple of headlines here from 2021, soon after we passed new clean energy targets and really started leaning into clean energy deployment under the Mills administration. But you also see one from just a couple of weeks ago. And the town of Harrington it's a small town, but they had a public meeting where 35 people showed up. And by the end of that meeting, solar was banned. It doesn't take many people sometimes to influence those local decisions, right? I couldn't help but wonder when I saw this headline, what would have happened if 1 or 2 people had showed up at that meeting and said, hey, are you sure this is what we want? Because a lot of towns really see a lot of economic development because of solar. And a lot of communities recognize that we need more clean energy on the grid. Luckily, we have a clean energy for all local deployment program for that. I am lucky enough to get to work really closely. So I get to work with all 30 of the state affiliates in the conservation voters movement. And I get to work really closely with 11 states that are pursuing local deployment in a very strategic way. They're doing that by streamlining permitting so that we design better projects and we build them faster. They're doing that by pushing back on local resolutions that limit the development of clean energy, whether it's an outright moratorium or those really troublesome ordinances that add up to a moratorium. They're doing that by driving local approvals, making sure that one or two or three or 30 people show up at the local meeting where a potential ban or a potential project is discussed and say, let's do the right thing. They're doing that by shaping responsible projects and signaling to developers, this is what we expect. This is what we expect in terms of environmental conservation. It's what we expect in terms of local benefits. I know that there are some lunch and learns in the archives on community benefits agreements, also on tribal consultation, right? And making sure that we are really working in a government to government way with our tribal nations, not our tribal nations, with tribal nations. Um, and finally, with building public support. So states are doing all of those things. And what I'm going to do now is kind of walk you through some examples from beyond Maine, and then talk a little bit about what I see here in Maine, and then where we might go together. So let's start with streamlining permitting. Oh, goodness, permitting reform. There is a great deal of discussion at the federal level. There's also a lot that states can do. And so I want to just talk you through four different main models for how states approach this. The threshold model is essentially that either the state or the local municipality has complete control, and that the way you decide who's in charge is the size of the project. This is the way Massachusetts handles it. For large projects, the Energy Facilities Siting Board has 15 months to issue a consolidated permit that includes all of the necessary approvals. Smaller projects, municipalities have 12 months to do that same thing. That is per the 2024 climate law in Massachusetts. So that's one way to handle it. The safety net and the guardrails models are sort of paired because the safety net is one that sets a floor and the guardrails is one that sets a ceiling. So for the safety net model, and this is how Michigan handles it, the state has very clear, detailed standards for setbacks, noise limits, other technical requirements. And local governments can establish whatever ordinances and processes they choose, as long as they don't get more restrictive than the standards set at the state level. They actually, in Michigan, there's a financial incentive to communities to handle the process at the local level and meet those state standards. In Illinois, they use the guardrails model, which is where the state has really detailed uniform siting standards, and local governments must pass ordinances that comply with those. And then finally, the referee model is one where projects are cited locally, but developers can appeal anything that they see as unreasonable to state agencies. What happens in Maine? Well, you better believe we don't let anything get permitted at the state level without local involvement, right? We have both state and local permitting. So state agencies issue the appropriate permits for wetlands and shoreland protection and natural resource protection. And then municipalities issue the actual permits for land use purposes. Okay, I'm going to take a break from talking and let this lovely woman from Illinois tell you a little bit about the next strategy, which is pushing back on local restrictions. So let me hit go
Well,
here.
as you can see, it's pretty windy out here, and this is a typical day for being out on the prairie. It's always windy. I'm Karen Smithcox. I live in Sullivan, Illinois, Moultrie County, right smack dab in the middle of the state. Max and I had always considered having to diversify our 360 acres. One evening we were sitting here at our house and someone knocked on our door. The representative came in and he got talking about the renewables, and then it was like it piqued my interest. Max and I did a lot of talking, and there was a lot of soul searching there too, because Max and I grew up in farm families. You don't sell land. You don't take land out of production. With the wind turbines, though, it made sense enough because it only takes out of production 1 acre. And there's not another type of business that would take 1 acre out of your 360 acres that would provide a good enough second income to even think about doing. From the very beginning, Max and I's concern was his daughters being able to keep the farm ground and keep it in the family. As one of my pillows over there says, family is everything. His father and mother worked, saved, scrimped, saved to buy the land. It wasn't given to them. They bought the land, but they wanted the right to give it to their granddaughters, who they loved. We had heard different things that the county was considering, the different sightings, but they just decided, the board, to ban any kind of wind at all. First it was shock, then it was, I got torqued. They're taking away our rights to improve our land. That's just against all principles of the United States of America. And for this county board to say, no, you can't do that, was a slap in the face. Each resident in Moultrie County would benefit, because if the wind turbines come in, they would produce so much more tax revenue. Schools probably wouldn't have to raise taxes for a long time. A lot of people say, no, we don't want the turbines because we don't want to look at it. Okay, then don't look at your high school falling apart. Don't look at kids struggling because they don't have the right teachers. I have a grandniece who's autistic. I would like to see her have a teacher that knows about autism. I got online, read the CEJA, the Climate and Equitable Jobs Act, and I looked up the sponsors because, okay, you want this here, I want this here, but the county says no. So I emailed every single sponsor of the bill, and one of them put me in contact with an advocate in Springfield. And then that's when things started rolling, because they realized, okay, they passed CEJA, but if the county can take away property owners' rights, then how are these turbines going to be built? They got together and started talking, I guess, and realizing, hey, we got to do something to help the property owners. Today we have a state law that's going to help the landowners and the counties. The county still has to have the permits. The wind companies have to go through the county boards with the permits, the siting. The bill was just giving the rights back to the landowners, that tells the landowners, hey, you can diversify your farm ground so you can have the next generation and the next generation to keep the ground. I mean, family and farming is intertwined for generations and generations, and we're hoping to keep it that way.
I love that. I love that video so much. And just want to let you all know that once that law was changed in Illinois, so before the law changed the way that she was describing, at least 15 counties were identified as effectively barring or significantly hindering renewables development. And as of today, every single one of those has at least one clean energy project in the queue. So changing those, having somebody reach out and say, this makes a difference for me, and this is why, it really does matter. And you can see here, if you, I'm doing that thing where I can't figure out how to go back into full screen, so we're just going to go with this. But you may have seen on my example about Maine not being immune that the town of Moscow is one that had a ban. Back in November 2023, there was a vote 16-4 of residents who said, yeah, we want to ban solar. Well, just last year, they reconsidered and voted 35-10 to overturn that ban. That particular effort was really driven by developers who had identified a spot in the town that was really valuable, and they wanted to build there, but it doesn't have to be. It can also be a matter of driving local approvals. So the way that happens, this is again one of our strategies that states are pursuing. It may be to develop a model ordinance. In states like Maine, where home rule is really, really valued, the state is not in a position to say, here's what your solar ordinance can be. But you can develop model ordinances and say, this is what we recommend. So just towards the end of last year, Conservation Voters of South Carolina wrapped up a process where they brought together a whole bunch of different stakeholders. So solar developers, storage developers, conservation and farm groups, and state agencies and utilities. And they came together and they developed a model ordinance for utility scale solar and storage and made that available. It was finished November, December. It's already been adopted in one county in South Carolina, and they're in active conversations with half a dozen more. So this is a really powerful way to put a good suggestion out there and show what it looks like. There's also a matter of direct advocacy to decision makers. Our friend in Illinois, from the example of the video we just watched, talked about reaching out to state representatives, which is something you all do all the time, I know. You can do that same sort of advocacy at the local level. The decision makers on your planning board or zoning board or town council or select board, they may not hear from you very often at all. But if you let them know, no, we really want to see this adopted in our town. We really want to see this project approved in our town. It can make all the difference in the world. Conservation voters in Nebraska have actually leaned into the electoral side of that work and endorse in the local elections for the planning board or the zoning board or what have you to say, no, we want to have folks on those local decision-making bodies who we know share our values and we know are committed to clean energy deployment. Of course, community engagement is always important. That's how we get those folks out to the meeting and let those preferences and values be known. And there is always expert guidance. And this is the thing that I see Maine really shining in. So our friends at GrowSmart Maine, part of the Environmental Priorities Coalition, have a great site with municipal tools for solar siting. And you can see some of the organizations or agencies that GrowSmart pulls together. Maine Audubon has an incredible solar ordinance. So does Maine Farmland Trust. So does the American Farmland Trust. And there's one easy place to find all of those guidelines. There's also the matter of shaping responsible projects. This is where we signal to developers, this is what we want to see, right? This is the kind of community benefits we want to see. And I want to share a little bit about the work that the Ohio Environmental Council does in this, because it's really different actually than what we see in most other states in the CVM, the Conservation Voters Movement. The OEC actually has a law center where they are very, very active in the state's Public Utilities Commission. They call it a PSC rather than a PUC, but they engage in those dockets. They communicate to their members, folks like you, what is going on in the utility scale solar landscape in Ohio. And they make it really easy for folks to get involved. Internally, the OEC has what they call a solar justice scorecard, where they actually share with developers to say, okay, we're going to engage in a certain number of dockets and a certain number of projects. Do you think we will put our time and energy and money into projects that don't score well on the solar justice scorecard? I don't think so. Here's the key. Here's what we want to see. You want to see us get involved? You do things right from the very beginning. This is different, but a decent example, I think, is the way we have engaged in offshore wind development in Maine. And I pulled this example, and this will be in the follow-up email. There'll be links to a bunch of different things that we've mentioned here today. But this was an example from an op-ed a couple of years ago from our friends at Maine Climate Action Now, talking about what responsible community involvement looks like for offshore wind with a particular focus on tribal engagement. MCAN has been absolutely essential in helping the tribal nations in Maine secure funding for staff expertise on offshore wind development. So the Penobscot Nation has an offshore wind coordinator. And that's the kind of work that really makes sure that the tribes are able to put in the time that is required because they have the staff capacity to be a full active participant in shaping those projects. There is a lot of overlap when it comes to shaping responsible projects with all of the other strategies. Because if we have good projects, we feel fine about permitting them more quickly, right? We don't need to have as long a process if we know they were designed right from the first and the community was really behind them. And that's where all of you come in. When you attend programs like the Lunch and Learn, when you attend Conservation Lobby Day, when you reach out to your representatives at the local and the state and the federal levels, and let them know that you want to see clean energy move from that commitment to the actual projects so that we're bringing more clean energy online. It makes all the difference in the world. And I'm so grateful to all of you for being here. As always, you're going to get a great email from Maggie at the end of this with a few follow-ups, including links to some of the resources that we mentioned today. And I'll tease a little bit. We started with a slide from the CEFA Success in the States report, which you'll find a link to in that email. And you will also find a way to sign up to receive, to find out when this new report that is all about local clean energy deployment comes out in a couple of weeks. So Maggie, I'm sorry to step on your lines there, but I will leave it there. And I'm just so excited to be with you all. And I think we probably have some time for questions.
Yes, we do. And thank you so much. You did a great job with the calls to action. I don't even need to fill anything in. And you'll get that all in the follow-up email after. But I wanted to start, Kathleen, thinking broadly, and then narrow into main specific questions. But so you're working across the country in 30 different states. What are the things that separate the places that are getting these projects implemented from the places that you're seeing having really hard times, either stalling or getting canceled?
Such a good question. And one of the things, I'm going to call back to that map we started with again of where the clean energy for all programs are strong and where we have those 100% clean energy commitments either in statute or through executive action. What is really interesting is I mentioned that there are 11 states doing really exciting local deployment work. Only 4 of them have a statewide commitment to 100% clean energy. So just like in times like the Trump administration, you hear folks saying all the time, we may not be able to make as much progress at the federal level, but by gosh, we can definitely keep making progress at the state level. That's true one level down too, right? Even when you're not making progress at the state level, you can make progress at the local level. So that's a sort of convoluted way of saying, I don't know. It really is, there's not one way that this work is unfolding across the country. And I think that's really exciting because it means everybody has this ability at your very local level to declare that intention and to actually create the environment where renewable energy development is easier. There's a question mark at the end of that. I know it's not ever easy, but we're making it easier as we can.
And since so much happens at the local level, obviously this means that all of us on this call could be, being active, supporting these projects. And I definitely wanted to ask, do you, are there any ways that you've seen work really well to get people engaged? Are there things we should stay away from? So like, yeah, what actually works when you're trying to get people in your town or your friends or your grandmother to get involved in these kind of things?
The good news is that so much of it is person to person, right? That you can have those conversations around the dinner table or at the dog park or the local coffee shop. And that the sort of flip side of this really challenging information landscape that we all live in, right? Where there's so much out there that might be or might not be true. And some of it is directly traced to fossil fuel connections, right? We know that folks aren't playing fair. But we also know that we each have the ability to get good information and to share that out. There's been a lot of there's been a lot of reporting nationally about the number of public comments that appear to be fraudulent, created by AI, attributed to people who don't exist. Um, there are some stories, some really terrible stories about solar projects in Ohio or air quality standards in California, in which the sheer volume of negative comments tipped the balance, even though when we look at that, they weren't real. The great thing about work at the local level is you can actually be a face to go with that comment, right? You can go up to your select board chair and in the grocery store and say, "Hey, I'm a real person. You know me. Our kids go to school together, whatever it is." You can really back up that. And in this time when the online ecosystem is so untrustworthy, your face, your value, your realness can carry the day.
So true. We know now more than ever we need to be connecting as human beings, and I feel like this, yeah, directly translates to being able to talk about how we need clean energy in our backyards. And I definitely want to hear a bit. I have quite a lot of Maine specific clean energy deployment questions, which I do want to get to. But, you've been working across the country now for over a year and thinking about how Maine and Mainers think about siting and think about clean energy deployment here in our home state. Do you find that Maine is kind of like with the trends, or are we a little more against deployment for? Just wanted to hear like how now that you have this national perspective, what does Maine look like on that scale?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And again, it doesn't always, it's not always the same statewide, right? So there are with the caveat that there are going to be parts of Maine that are stronger or that are ahead or behind parts of any other state. Um, I think that we have a real, first of all, you see my Maine-made offshore wind. I tell everybody I work nationally, but my heart is in Maine, and so it won't surprise you to hear that I think Maine does a really great job. We first of all, I'm going to just give you some flowers here, Maggie, of the work that you do to help connect people to good information and to clarify all of that, the need and the interest and the benefits in clean energy. Maine has a very, very strong environmental community and a long history of working in partnership to move us forward. Also want to celebrate all the work that the Climate Council has done over the past many years and the sort of gradual march of progress of really making sure that we're bringing communities and community voices into those state level decisions. Maine is a small town, right? We know this. It is as easy for us to stop our state legislators in the grocery store as it is to stop our select board members. And we do that, right? And so I think that there is often less distance between the local policies and the state policies, though of course it's going to vary dramatically from community to community, or it may vary dramatically from community to community. The other thing that I want to just name is that so much of our energy future in Maine really depends on offshore wind deployment, right? And this is true on the East Coast generally, we don't have the kind of sheer scale of land the way the woman in Illinois was talking about in that video, where you can take an acre out of production because it's a 360-acre family farm. We have a big, on the East Coast, we have big population centers that are not contiguous with those big opportunities for land-based renewables. We also have the Gulf of Maine. And so we have tremendous capacity, and we need to achieve that tremendous capacity to bring all of that offshore wind online. And this is where the federal level is just such a mess. And so it's so important for us to keep projecting to our local officials, to our state officials, and to our federal officials that we want to see that offshore wind developed and developed well.
Right. And I was not even looking for a pat on the back for myself in the state, but go Maine sounds like we're crushing it. Thank you for
Always.
making us feel good. Um, and I did want to talk about, so obviously citing these energy projects, it's solar, it's wind, hydro, but when you're thinking about like data centers, do you worry about people pushing back on these local ordinances? Are you worried about them using the arguments that we're making to try and get data centers through quicker? And just wondering if that's a valid argument.
It is really important to wrestle with that, right? Because the last thing we want is um, to undermine communities' voices in their own futures. We believe really strongly that communities can and must be partners in what their community looks like, right? It is, and that's why we value home rule so much, right? It's not up to somebody in Augusta to tell us what our home communities are going to look like. And there is a community level and a statewide level and a national level, and let's be honest, a global interest in continuing to develop clean energy. And that's why it's so important. And you'll never hear us say we want to speed up development at any cost, right? We want to speed up responsible development. One of the things I mentioned, the new permitting process in Massachusetts, that was established in their 2024 climate law, and the rulemaking has been ongoing, and so it's not fully in effect yet, but will be operational this summer. One of the pieces of that process is you can't apply for a permit unless can demonstrate that you've done community level work. And there are guidelines about what a community benefits agreement should look like. And I know we've talked about this in other times, but just a quick reminder to everybody that at the way a community benefits agreement works is when a renewable energy developer says, we're going to build this project, and here's what it's going to mean for you. It's going to mean this number of jobs. It might mean this level of investment in your schools. That's what the woman in Illinois was pointing towards. There is a version of a community benefits agreement that feels a little bit like a bribe, right? Like, here's some money for your local priorities, and we'll do what we want to do over here. That's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're advocating for. We want to see long-term health and sustainability and stability of local communities. And so you can't do that by just checking a bunch of boxes and writing a check. It's really about that relationship building. And I know MCV does so much of this work. Partners in the Mainers for Offshore Wind do so much of this work of really bringing people together and saying, okay, what do we need? What does it look like to have a healthy community going forward? And where does this renewable energy project fit into that? So data centers, to bring it back around, could conceivably do that, but I don't think they are. And so there's a lot of energy, if you will, around what does a good data centers policy look like. My absolute favorite from a pop culture connection point of view is the Illinois effort called Beyonce, bring your own clean energy, right? So while clean energy, while data center developers in some states have said, yeah, sure, we'll build our own energy. It's going to be a new natural gas plant. No, thank you. We want a new solar, or we want it to be a clean energy. And we also want to make sure that our water is protected. Because data centers are tremendous energy users and they're also tremendous water users. So if you can design a responsible data center project that meets the needs of the community and does not strain our energy and water resources and does all of that, well, then let's talk. And if you can't, it's probably not a good fit for our community.
A very nuanced question. Thank you so much. That was a great answer. Feel like lots of agreement, lots of agreement. And I wanted to ask, have you been staying up to date with any of the bills at the Maine legislature that are working around siting? I'm specifically thinking about LD 2011 or 2112, the an act to enable municipalities to establish community choice. I just wanted to see what you're thinking about that bill.
So now, as a regular person, I rely on my updates from MCV, and I cannot hold bill numbers in my head. So I really appreciate the way that you walk me through it. When I get your emails, I'm always like, oh, what does Maggie have to say today? Um, and that said, I don't know much about that one.
Okay, okay. I didn't know how much you were involved in the state legislation still, so great. Thank you. And yeah, I'm sure we can, you might get an email about it because I think
Perfect. Can't
it might
wait.
be coming for a vote. Yeah. Um, I want to know what you're most excited about for clean energy deployment, both nationally, but especially here in Maine.
All right, well, I'm going to share something that is on my horizon and that I'm very excited about right now. And then we'll talk about Maine. But there is a community in Ohio, Richland County, Ohio. Ohio has a just absolutely terrible law that has been in place for about 5 years now, called SB 52, that gives counties the ability to ban renewable energy. And so the county commission in Richland County did that last summer. They have the authority, they passed the vote, total solar ban in all of the communities in Richland County. What they didn't perhaps see coming is that maybe the best part about SB 52 is that there is a line in there about communities rejecting the decisions of their county commissions by referendum. They don't have a huge window. They have 30 days from the date that the county commission makes a decision to get enough signatures to qualify for the ballot. And that's not a lot of time, but they did it. And on May 5th, Richland County will have the potential to be the first community in the country to reject a renewables ban by referendum. And that is so exciting. And it's typically the kind of thing that I would not tell you about until May 6th so that I could tell you how it turned out. But I can't keep it to myself. And part of that is because it is so exciting. The folks who started that campaign in Richland County, they're just regular people. They did not have the backing of a developer. In fact, there is not a single project proposed in Richland County right now. They're not out there trying to get this solar project or that wind project built. They just don't agree with the county commission's statement that they don't want renewable energy development. And they're letting their officials know. So look for an update on May 6th. My sense is that it's going really well. They have, it was a citizen group that started it, and they are getting some attention and some support from other organizations, but it is and you'll see there's a link to their website when you get into the follow-up email. Excuse me. Um, I am excited about that process and about that example because it reminds us that we each have that ability and that power should we use it. So my biggest ask to all of you is to pay attention to what's on the zoning board, what the planning board is talking about. Whether you have a project that is proposed in your community or not, you may have the ability to go, the opportunity to say, hey, let's raise our hand and say we would welcome a responsible project here. Uh, you can go, those decision-making bodies always take public comment that about things that aren't on the agenda. You could go and just say, hey, what are we doing to help Maine reach its goal of 100% clean energy by 2040? How can we be part of that? Um, and if I know anything about Maine people and Maine communities, it's that you will do that. You will take that. You will stand up for it and really um, help build the future that we are all trying to work for together. So I just am so grateful to all of you and to MCV and to Maggie and the whole team. Um, it's been so much fun to chat with you all today. And as I said, I'm really excited to share this big report that's coming out in a few weeks. And Maggie will let you know how to track it down.
Yes, yes, I will. Thank you so freaking much, Kathleen. It has been so wonderful having you on, and obviously seeing your lovely face is just great. And I learned a lot, so what a
Yay.
win-win.
The
Um,
highlight of my day, week, month, year. So thank you.
Exactly, exactly. Thank you all so much for joining. You'll get that follow-up email with the resources and a reminder to please be watching your local zoning board and planning board and getting involved when you can. And I will see you back here in April on the 10th when we're going to be talking to some folks from the New England Forestry Foundation. So look forward to seeing you then and have a great weekend, everyone. Thank you, Kathleen.
Thank you.